I've been thinking about the defining moments of my wargaming role-playing life, and this is my list. Wow! I'm going to start my journey before 1966. So before 1966, I was playing with toys. It weren't war games. I had some Britain's figures. I had a few Airfix figures, Robin Hood's men. I had a lot of Timpo, Swap It, Cowboys. 1966, Christmas Day, is the first real milestone because I got an Action Man. If you're watching in the US, that's supposed like G.I. Joe. And I immediately personified him. I made him into a chap called Ian, and I made him into a British soldier. I then stuck with only British uniforms. Over time, if you collected 21 stars, I think it was, from purchasers of Action Man equipment and vehicles and things, you could get a free Action Man. And I ended up with 6. And Ian, became a lieutenant, so I got the lieutenant's uniform. My best mate and I, Andy, in 1971, went to see Waterloo, the Rod Steiger film where he was Napoleon. And we went 7 nights in a row to the Gaumont in Doncaster, Gaumont Cinema. And the reason why we went so many times was because there were no videos or anything. And when a film wasn't on at the pictures, it was 7 years before it appeared on the TV. And we came back full of enthusiasm for the Napoleonic Wars. Just at the time when Airfix was starting to explode their range. So there were Airfix French infantry, there were Airfix British infantry, there were cuirassier cavalry, there was artillery. So we started to do that. Andy got French, I got British. And we had embryonic war games on the carpet in bedrooms. And we were playing games like diplomacy and risk, campaign, those sorts of games. 1972, my dad, in response to my growing interest in war games, mainly through Airfix figures, took me to Doncaster War Games Club at the YMCA in Doncaster. And the men there, I was by far the youngest, but they were playing with either 300th scale, what they call modern, but it wouldn't be modern now. It was sort of 6-day war type things, and 25mm Hinchcliffe Napoleonic, which is by far what most of the club were doing. So I got involved in that, and they taught me to play. They taught me about painting figures. The club encouraged you to paint figures only to the best of your ability. It was nothing sniffy. They used War Games Research Group rules. We went to shows. It was a whole experience. During 73, 74, miniature figurines came along, and they brought along their Tolkien licensed fantasy figures. No one had done that, and it was to fight battles from Lord of the Rings like a war game. You could use War Games Research Group rules. You could use chainmail and things, which Gary Gygax was involved with, but we didn't have those. And between 74 and 78, I was a fantasy gamer. Now, this isn't role-playing, this is wargaming. 78, Dungeons and Dragons comes along, certainly in the UK. So I'm right at the beginning of this. I see Dungeons and Dragons, I order it by mistake. I ordered the Sorcerer's Cave, Avalon Hill, I tick the wrong box, Tomb of Horrors arrives. Now, from 81 to 83, I was then going back towards Games Workshop. Games Workshop opened in Burnley. It was super convenient. I was working in Burnley, and I started to look at their figures, and they were beautiful. They were fantastic figures. A lot more interesting than the spindly efforts we'd been shown before, which I now love the spindly efforts because I like that nostalgia and character. But at the time, I wanted dwarves to carry rucksacks. I wanted maidens with dragons crawling around their legs. I wanted genies coming out of bottles. A lot of the stuff I wanted for Dungeons and Dragons was made by Citadel or Hinchcliffe. The Minch figurines were still a bit Tolkien-esque. Things changed. But it's sort of about that time I started to write my world of Joral, because I wanted the dungeons to take place somewhere, because if you survive and you throw it, how long is it before the next dungeon? You're not going to stumble out one straight into another. Where are you? What world are you in? So yeah, that was pretty much everything. Now, 84, I went to a school which had a Dungeons and Dragons club at the school. And the school after that also had a wargames club. They began to bring into that fantasy world elements that they saw in the science fiction world of Games Workshop. So they weren't Warhammer and they weren't 40k. They were fantasy worlds in which pretty much anything went. I would say it was more steampunk than anything else, but it wasn't imposed upon anybody. The kids came up with this and we all tagged along. It was all based around Games Workshop. People started to play Rogue Trader. People were playing Blood Bowl. People were playing, what would they be playing? Rogue Trader, RuneQuest, Hero Quest. Those sorts of things. That's where I first discovered Skaven. 96 to 2004 was another change. I joined a different club. And it was a club of, there were more teenager type people, not type, they were teenagers, largely. There were a few adults, mainly teenagers, and they were heavily influenced by 40k. 2005 to 2013, I left that club and I went to work in a company who made wargame scenery and wrote rules. I went to shows, I did displays, and we used to, on a Friday afternoon, we used to sort of work Monday to Friday lunchtime, and then Friday afternoon we'd clear all the tables away and all the employees would have a big war game. And we did 10 mil and we used Callistra figures. I had an elf army, another one of the lads had an undead army, somebody else had an orc army. 2014 and today, I joined a club where I live now. I then ended up back in the historic gamers where I've been for 12, 13 years. At some point now, that's me finished. All there is in the new place I'm going to is Dungeons and Dragons Club. So that's the first thing, that's the next bit of the journey. So 2026 onward, milestone 11, is going to be largely Dungeons and Dragons interspersed with monthly games with the wargamers I knew at the old club. Are we going to be able to form a wargames club here where I'm going? I hope so. That's my aim. But you never know, do you? But what I do know is the journey goes on. What are your 10, however many milestones? Anyway, you know what? Ta-ra, chook.